Hello, team, and welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pearce. This is Ukraine war news update for the 1st of June. That's the first day of summer, and that might well be significant given what is going on in Ukraine. We're in this period between apparent Russian offensive and imminent Ukrainian counteroffensive. Summer is going to play a huge part in that. Hard ground, clear skies, so on and so forth. Anyway, before I get into the news, I did a poll yesterday as to whether you prefer and want the dark mode or the light mode. This is a dark mode, as you can see now. It was a pretty close poll. 55% went for dark and 45% to light. So it's not that, clear what I should do. So I'll probably do some videos in dark mode and then occasionally mix it up with some in light mode. And some people are angry enough with dark mode that they said they'd unsubscribe type thing. So people either really like the dark mode or really hate it. But most people seem to prefer the dark mode. So I don't know. There you go. I'll have a think about it. Right. We'll continue nonetheless in dark mode. We'll go to what is usually the opening gambit. It's now been pushed back to second place. The general staff figures, Ukrainian general staff figures for the Russian losses for the day before. All the usual caveats apply. I find these indicatively useful. 400, and we'll talk a little bit more about the figures in a second. 460 liquidated personnel. That is pretty much where it was yesterday, very close to 470 yesterday. 2 tanks, 6 APCs, fairly low considering what they have been. 6 APCs is obviously still somewhat painful for the Russians. 14 artillery systems. As I say, I'm going to talk about figures in methodology to some degree, but also how the Ukrainians appear to definitely be targeting those artillery systems. 7 drones, 9 vehicles and fuel tanks, and 4 pieces of special equipment. So 4 pieces of special equipment has gone up from 0 yesterday. There have been very high numbers of those. We are now, I think, just over 1 a day on average for the length of the war in pieces of special equipment, and that was well under 1 a day. So the last 2 weeks has really shifted the average, and that is an indication of the Ukrainians' desire to take out ISR equipment, particularly that's intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance. Again, this is going to be ahead of a counteroffensive, one would think, although it's still particularly useful to take that out anyway. Right. Okay, let's look at. Actually, before we look at some of these figures, let's just mention that the Russian Volunteer Corps and the Freedom Legion of Russia have entered the Belgorod region again. Heavy battles are reported near Shebekino. That is ongoing, perhaps. Already they have taken out a mortar, self-propelled mortar, and a Kamaz with ammo. There's footage of that kicking around. That the Russians have claimed that actually they've neutralized these guys and they're no longer a threat, and they've used Tor missile system to take aim at them. So anyway, that I'll report with more detail on that at a later point in the day, I think. And then going on to talk about the figures in general, Kremlin Artillery in Ukrainian crosshairs, says the Kiev Post. Russian guns singled out for destruction. Claimed kills of Russian mortars, howitzers, and rocket launchers has spiked by 65% in the last 2 weeks as Ukraine's military counts down to the launch of a major offensive. During a 2-week period, April the 28th and May the 11th, according to official Russian equipment destruction claims published by Ukraine's Army General Staff, AGS, Ukraine's military by all means destroyed or otherwise put out of action 166 tube artillery systems, meaning mortars, howitzers, and cannon operated by the Russian army. Now, this is an article from May the 11th. We are now at the end of, May is gone, we're into June. So this is some 3 weeks out of date, pretty much. But it gives you a sense of, the targeting of the Ukrainians. That has only spiked further. Those numbers of tube artillery and multiple launch rocket systems had been lost at an even greater rate since this article. Over a parallel 2-week period, exactly 1 month earlier, from March 29th to April the 11th, the Ukrainian army claimed 108 systems destroyed. The category Russian army rocket artillery systems, including the widely feared 122mm Grad and 300mm Smerch rocket launchers. By those numbers, saw a similar jump in claimed Ukrainian kills from 9 systems a month ago to 16 systems, currently over a similar 2-week period. Again, they've gone up more since then. An independent overview of Russian losses published by the Iceland-based analyst Ragnar Gudmundsson, who I've referred to before, using open source data, registered a similar trend, with our Russian artillery losses spiking 21% over the last 7 days compared to the previous 7 days. AGS spokesmen have said they believe the estimates to be highly accurate, as all kill claims by troops, as a matter of army policy, must be documented by physical inspection on the ground or by reliable images, very frequently captured by civilian drones, ubiquitously by frontline Ukrainian troops. Okay, so this is actually a kind of doctrinal thing, or it is army policy. The counting of these, yes, there will be estimations. Of course, there will be, especially when you're having long-range missile strikes. But otherwise, they do apparently try pretty hard to make sure that the figures they have are accurate. A typical engagement was recorded by a drone operated by the 36th Marine Brigade, an amphibious infantry formation operating in the Donbass sector, that observed a Russian 2-man 82mm mortar team uncovering and opening fire from a residential courtyard in a village. The officially redacted images show 3 howitzer shells striking the site directly, followed by an airburst, and another shell leveling a house next to the mortar position. The video does not show Russian troops hit, but most military analysts would rate the mortar fire position as almost certainly destroyed, as did Kiev Post analysts. In other words, you're looking at the most likely probability here that if you're going to hammer that position with a bunch of artillery shells and airburst munition, then they're likely taken out. In recent weeks, AFU and Russian army sources alike have reported Kiev's troops have far more to shoot with as well. So this is going back again to May the 10th. On May the 10th, in the Bakhmut sector, according to accounts from the 3rd Assault Brigade, among others, AFU troops backed by substantial artillery ran a successful counterattack, advancing 2.6 kilometers. This is the beginning of the localized counterattacks in Bakhmut, killing or putting to flight 2 companies from an elite Russian infantry brigade. So that gives you a little bit of an insight into claims of accuracy, or to how they count these figures and whether they are accurate. I think that the Ukrainian figures are certainly more accurate than Russian figures, and lately the Russians have been claiming absolutely fanciful data. It just goes to show that they are untrustworthy sources. Okay, what's happened last night? 10 missiles were sent into Ukraine, and apparently all of them were shot down. That included 7 ballistic missiles, or at least I think they're all shot down around Kiev. I think there may have been some ballistic missiles that found their mark in places like Kharkiv. So not 100% sure exactly what's happened. Just in Kiev, I think they were all shot down, and that's kind of what you would expect given the plethora of air defense systems set around the capital. 3 people have been killed, including a child, in a Russian missile attack on Kiev on Children's Day. But then you hear things like this. So was this a hospital being purposefully targeted, in which case that missile did get through? Or was this a missile that was shot out the sky and landed in a hospital, in which case the hospital wasn't targeted? Trying to work out what's gone on. All targets were shot down, but collateral damage from the attack, with likely ballistic missiles, resulting in the death of 2 women and an 11-year-old girl. So this is a claim that it was collateral damage. And then the reason why I talked about both options there, even though Euromaidan Press sided with one, you go to another source here that says Russia bombed a hospital in Kiev, Desnyan district. 3 people were killed, including 2 children. And of course, language is important. So did Russia bomb that hospital? Well, yes, I guess so. But that implies intention. And if that shot out the sky, was that missile already going for that hospital and shot out the sky very close to the hospital and still hit the hospital? Or was that missile going somewhere else and was shot out of the sky and hit the hospital? In which case, the idea that Russia bombed the hospital as a kind of an intention for the Russians is problematic to claim. Do you know what I mean? Anyway, some photos came out last night, recently released. Headquarters of the main director of intelligence of the Ukrainian Armed Forces, GUR, appears to have suffered multiple direct hits from Russian cruise missiles and or Shahed 136 drones over the last few days. This seems to align with earlier claims by the Russian Ministry of Defense that President Putin and the Russian military had targeted decision-making centers in Kiev alongside buildings related to Ukrainian military intelligence. So as you can see there, I don't know if that's significant damage. Those are trees at the bottom there, so it's really there will be some damage, but I don't know how widespread that is. Footage from a security camera near the building also reportedly shows either a Russian cruise missile or what appears to be a PAC-3 interceptor missile from an American Patriot air defense battery, almost striking the Havana Bridge, which is a primary route to uh, Rebelsky Island, where the Ukrainian military intelligence headquarters is located. So you can see there, very close to the military intelligence headquarters there, that missile coming down and hitting the water. Additional information regarding the strikes against the Ukrainian military intelligence headquarters and the Havana Bridge, showing satellite imagery from the island. So that's been geolocated. Some people were calling that kind of dodgy footage. I shared it, and someone was saying that they tried to get the visuals on that, and they just can't get it, and the angles and whatnot. But anyway, that seems to be kosher, as according to some geolocators and whatnot. So the question then is, will they have taken out intelligence workers? And many people saying in the threads that it's ridiculous to think that the Ukrainian intelligence would be working in the Ukrainian intelligence building during a war, and when that building can be struck, or the other option is as soon as they hear the air raid shelter, they are out of there as one of the main kind of that. It's just policy. I would assume that you wouldn't be allowed to be continuing to work and thinking, hey, we won't get hit. So those kind of very sensitive targets. Some people are saying they'll be in the basements in the Second World War. Those in London during the Blitz, those kind of people were not working in the buildings that they were supposed to be working, so on and so forth. So various claims concerning that. Right, footage is reported in Balashikha, a suburb of Moscow. Smoke after the drones reportedly hit an unknown site about an hour ago. So this was last night. So there were, in other words, or yesterday evening. In other words, that Ukraine was still targeting Moscow with drones after the initial sort of wave of drones previously. And in Tovakovo, in the Kaluga region in Russia, a drone has crashed and left a fairly big crater. In other words, Ukraine are still sending their drones across Russia, not just at Moscow. So keeping the Russians on their toes, keeping those air defense systems fixed, causing the Russian population to panic and hopefully go against the Kremlin's desires to keep the war going. I guess those would be the intentions. Now, rare video of the work of a Ukrainian Vilka M 300mm heavy multiple rocket launcher designed by Ukraine's Luk Design Bureau. It was based on the BM-30 Smerch MRLL. According to the Ukrainian sources, Vilka M is able to launch guided rockets at a range of up to 110 kilometers. And there's been talk, and I've mentioned these before, how these could explain some of the longer ranged targets that have been hit by the Ukrainians behind Russian lines, but it's difficult to know. Anyway, they are being used, and they are obviously still making these missiles, at least to some degree. How many, I don't know, but that gives them that range capability for guided rocket attacks. Okay, let's go to odds and sods, bits and pieces here. Counterintelligence has revealed a traitor in the ranks of the armed forces of Ukraine. This kind of stuff happens quite often. I don't always report on it, but this is quite an interesting one, because this guy was doing, I think he was in Bakhmut and giving information about Ukrainian forces and positions and whatnot. Sergeant of the Armed Forces of Ukraine was recruited by the Russian Special Services. He leaked data on the location of air defense to his curators, and they were also very interested in weapons systems. He was then going to be moved to, I forget, somewhere else. I was reading somewhere else, but they caught him before that happened, and he's been taken away. Okay, Ukraine has confirmation of Belarus's participation in the deportation of Ukrainian children. This was stated by the commissioner of the Verkhovna Rada for Human Rights, Dmytro Lubinets. We have confirmation that through the territory of Belarus, with the direct participation of the Belarusian authorities, There was a forced transfer of both Ukrainian children, civilian hostages, and prisoners of war, Rubinet said. So that is Belarus complicit in war crimes. And those are the war crimes that have been set against Putin and the child minister in Russia, who have both been issued an arrest warrant. So this is serious stuff. Okay, Ukrainian forces are now shooting fish in the Bakhmut barrel, says Defmon. I talked to you yesterday about there being claims of the Ukrainians that they are hammering the Russians in Bakhmut. So the Russians pretty much control the whole of Bakhmut. I say pretty much because we're going to come on to that in a second. Now that the Russians are kind of safely in Bakhmut, they ain't so safe because the Ukrainians are now able to hit them with extensive artillery barrages, is the claim. And the Ukrainians in place have been crowing about this, so I think they must be having some kind of success. Defmon seems to agree with that. Now, the Defense Ministry is saying the southwestern outskirts of Bakhmut remain in Ukrainian control. This is kind of amazing that they are still claiming this, and it's been a week since Russia have broadly taken Bakhmut. Southwestern outskirts of Bakhmut and the entrance to the city remain in control of the Ukrainian forces, Deputy Defense Minister Malia said yesterday. According to Malia, the offensive activity of the Russian forces in Bakhmut has been halted. However, Russian forces have increased the frequency of artillery shelling, indicating a change in tactics. So rather than trying to take that last area of Bakhmut on the ground, they are just hammering it with artillery themselves. So both sides swapping artillery. Okay, going along to Zaporizhia now and the nuclear power plant at Enerhodar. Here's a video from August showing Russia's military moving around Zaporizhia nuclear power plant. We shouldn't be surprised at the lies. After all, they had 5 different fake versions of what happened to the passenger jet MH17 when they murdered 300. Okay, this is kind of talking about a lot of movement around Enerhodar even now. I know this goes back to August, but there's footage that proves that the Russians are storing a whole load of military equipment in the nuclear power station. We have seen various bits of footage of that. It is the talk of the town at the moment, the nuclear power station, because I think there's claims that there might be false flag attacks on there. There might have already been some false flag attacks on there, that they are sabotaging the nuclear power plant in case they lose it, that they are storing a load of vehicles there, they're mining everywhere around it. It seems to be somewhere that is either being weaponized or being used to protect a whole load of stuff. Now, that protection aspect, it doesn't surprise me. If I was in charge of any army and we had the control of a nuclear power station, I would place loads of stuff there, because you're ring fencing it from being attacked. You like, well, the enemy aren't going to bomb a nuclear power station, their own nuclear power station, so we might as well keep loads of our high value assets there, because there's no safer place. So I do understand that. You might disagree with that, but from a military point of view, I'm pretty sure the Ukrainians would make the same decision if those roles were reversed. Right, we're going to talk a little bit about bridges. Mykolaiv region, 2 more bridges were restored thanks to the donors of United 24 platform. Interesting. So they're not just sort of providing drones. This was announced by the Minister of Digital Transformation, Mikhailo Fedorov. Interesting that he's the drone and tech guy, and they're talking about bridges here. But we continue to restore normal life in the territories liberated from the Russians. In total, 13 bridges have already been rebuilt. This is the speed with which Ukraine is trying to return normality to their citizens' lives. I wonder whether the same can be said about what's happening in Mariupol, in and around Donbass, whether the Russians are trying to rebuild things as quickly as the Ukrainians are. Might show you a little bit of a difference between the two, but this not only allows normal life to return for citizens, but it allows logistics to flow freely in terms of supply of troops and fuel and equipment, etc., etc. So there's a dual purpose to this. Now, staying on bridges, this is reported to be the current state of the supports of the Kerch Bridge into Crimea. Wow, that's not looking too good, guys. I'd be slightly worried about that. There's a bridge that really does need a bit of TLC. And then finally, for this segment, another 200 sergeants of the armed forces of Ukraine completed a course of training. I guess this should be in the military aid section. Actually, we're just about to go on to that. a course of training in the norms of international humanitarian law offered by the Geneva Center for Security Sector Governance together with the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine. This is uh, another example of the Ukrainian military just getting training, consistently being trained with the help of NATO, with the help of allies, not just in terms of fighting, but this is international humanitarian law. Trying to make the Ukrainian army the you know a really decent fighting force across all of the domains of fighting war, and that's hugely important. I'm not sure we've seen that kind of training for the Russians, have we, in humanitarian law? And perhaps they would really profit from that. Right, I'm going to right. Whoever is in charge of Ukrainian military PR should get an award. I mean, they're just awesome. And that wins. If I'm here fawning over that, then they're winning the war in the information space, aren't they? In a slip video, the Russian MOD has asked the Australian government to transfer M1A1 Abrams tanks to Ukraine. Australia is now in the process of re-equipping tank forces. The older M1A1s are being replaced by M1A2s and put into storage. So, what are you going to do with all that stuff you're going to store? Well, this is just. And bear in mind that Mad Max is a very cool film franchise, just brilliant. I mean, Mad Max 2, who just brilliant. And it was filmed in Australia, right? It's an Australian thing, so they're riffing on that superbly. Oops, sorry. Start again. Now I'm going to have to turn the sound off now. It seems to be staggering a little bit anyway, because I'll get hit with an in excess copyright claim. But you can imagine in excess are going to kick in with with a pretty sweet tune. They were hand-me-downs from the US Army and Marine Corps. Pictures of these M1A1s doing some firing, and now Australia is getting a brand new fleet of M1A2 Abrams. It shows these big old tanks doing their job, and now we wonder what they're going to do with the hand-me-downs and a bit of Fury Road, Mad Max Fury Road, and spliced in with some tanks. Let the Abrams live again. So really appealing to the Australians there to get their kit over, their old kit, their hand-me-downs, their M1A1 hand-me-downs, down to get them across to Ukraine so the Ukrainians can use them. And yeah, why not? We can't see why not at all. Okay, US to provide more air defense systems, ammunition, following an upsurge in Russian attacks, says US National Security Council spokesman John Kirby said and announced that the US will provide Ukraine with more air defense in response to Russia's upsurge of attacks. They will provide additional ammunition for Patriot air defense systems, the quote, which Ukraine has been deploying quite effectively. Avenger air defense systems, Stinger air anti-aircraft systems, and additional ammunition for high mobility artillery rocket systems, also known as HIMARS, were also included in the latest package, according to Kirby. Well, let's go and have a little look at that. So we've got a drawdown, $300 million drawdown of allocated funds for Ukraine announced by the Department of Defense. We've got additional munitions for Patriot. We've got AIM-7 missiles for air defense. Apparently, they can be shot from book. Look, I think they can be. The books have been adapted to fire. What were the name? The RIM missiles, I think, possibly Canadian missiles, but they've been adapted. So I think the AIM-7 can be fired from them. Avenger SHORAD systems, Stinger anti-aircraft systems, HIMARS ammunition, 155 and 105 artillery rounds. So those 105 can be used in things like the French light tanks, some of the, I think the M55s that we're going to see in a second, and guns that use or equipment that use some of the older British barrels. Precision aerial munitions are included. Zuni aircraft rockets, those are unguided rockets. Munitions for unmanned aerial systems. 84 anti-armor systems. Over 30 million rounds of small arms ammunition and mine clearing equipment and systems. Demolition munitions for obstacle clearing. Night vision devices, spare parts, generators, and other field equipment. So that's a really useful package there from the Americans. And some noteworthy stuff here. Yeah, so this is someone commenting on these AIM-7 air defense missiles. First, the AIM-7 for air defense, they'll be launched from Book M1 launchers, integrating Sparrows in Books. They were the ones. Was a bumpy ride. Took longer than expected, but finally solves an ammo issue for a prolific system used in Ukraine. So they can't get the ammo for the Books. They're old Soviet pieces of kit with Soviet ammo, but they've been able to adapt NATO ammo to fire from those. And then this guy talks about the 105mm tank rounds. That ends the discussion on where to get ammo for Leopard 1 tanks. So the Leopard 1 used those as well. Now, actually, he says that, but they have already given 105mm rounds previously. So there's not the first package of those. US has also given financial grants worth 1.25 billion euros. The Ministry of Finance of Ukraine reports the funds will be used for wages and social assistance. I'm not sure where that kind of money comes from, how the finances of that work, but Ukraine are obviously going to be super grateful for that. Germany has also increased the military aid package for Ukraine following positions have been added, or the following equipment. 2 truck tractor trains, 8x8 HX81 plus 3 semi-trailers, 66 APCs, probably the Fuchs, could be the Boxer, could be the Dingo. People have been saying different things. 64 tracked all-terrain vehicles, the Bandwagen 206. Those are these ones down there, the Bandwagen. You might see them in kind of snowy conditions, but they're all-terrain vehicles that would be useful for transporting people around and stuff. 7 tracked and remote-controlled infantry vehicles, the Themis unguided ground vehicle, so that's like a ground drone, if you like, and Leopard 1 ammunition. So quite a good package, and that is a new package as well. As Oryx says, this is newly pledged equipment. It won't be there yet, but Germany are really coming up trumps. I think they're pretty much the second biggest donator in real terms of equipment to Ukraine after the US. Right, the German company Quantum Systems will give Ukraine an additional 300 reconnaissance drones, of vector drones. This drone can be deployed in 2 minutes, provides continuous target detection regardless of weather conditions, and uses artificial intelligence as well. So, more drones, and thank you very much to Germany's, I say not to Germany per se, but it looks like a private corporation in Germany. So, Norway will provide Ukraine with a 5-year aid program. I talked about this previously. And the good thing is that this is a kind of sustainable approach to supporting Ukraine. It's not just here's a one-off package, right? We'll forget about that off down a pub. It's like, okay, we need to think about providing you with stuff now, but also on an ongoing basis for the next however long. So Norway will provide Ukraine with a 5-year aid program, military, humanitarian, and civilian support, with a total volume of approximately 6.5 billion euros, 75 billion Norwegian kroner. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Norway reported. So fantastic there. Really good news. Thank you, Norway. Now, when you see Russians dusting off their old T-55s, and you think, well, the Ukrainians are getting just better equipment. But then some people said, well, these are M55s. They're just up T-55s, but they're not all. Actually, yeah, they are upgraded T-55s, but they're still a lot better than, well, for a start, the original, T-55s that the Russians have. And these guys will make a good match for the rest of the Russian equipment that they are using. So here we have, in training or getting towards the front line, I'm not sure exactly where this is, but a number of M55s looking pretty useful with their ERA, their explosive reactive armor, and all the bits and pieces that they have. So what's just to remind you about the M55S tanks, they were given by Slovenia. They're a deeply modernized Soviet T-55 tank, a tank type that first entered service in the late 1950s, but in the 1990s, the Slovenian army paid the Israelis, an Israeli firm, in Slovenia to modify 30 of its 36-ton T-55s. The company delivered the last example in 1999. Slovenian army in the early 2000s replaced the M55S with newer M84s and put the M55Ss in storage. Slovenian Prime Minister, on a telephone conversation with the German Chancellor Olaf Scholz in September, hammered out a deal whereby Germany would give Slovenia 40 military trucks, and Slovenia in turn would supply 28 M55Ss to Ukraine. That's enough tanks for a single battalion. Again, here we have Germany doing stuff actually quite a long time back that really helped out the Ukrainians, but the Slovenians probably got the kudos for that, and rightly so to some degree. But actually, that was facilitated by Germany doing something themselves. So again, props to Germany. Among other enhancements, including reactive armor, an uprated engine, and a new fire control system. Things like fire control systems are super important. If you can acquire a target before they've seen you, and you can get your shot off before they even know you're there, then it doesn't matter whether you're in a M55S or a Challenger to some degree. If you're getting that first shot off, you're almost certainly going to win that battle. And actually, tank on tank battles are very rare in the war. This is something that's been pointed out quite a bit recently. That someone was saying that Leopard 1s will have an advantage over Leopard 2s. So in Ukraine, and there was a video. Military History Visualized did a video on talking about the advantages that Leopard 1 has over Leopard 2. And it's when you're doing these evaluations, what you've got to understand is you will very rarely have a tank against a tank firing at each other in a tank duel. We've seen a handful of that video footage across the length of this war. Tanks are going to be used in other ways. They're going to be used to support troops in just kind of not quite indirect fire, but direct fire on like maybe trench lines or APCs or whatever. And actually, the difference then between an M55S and a Challenger, for example, is less important. Actually, the M55S can do that job, that support role, fairly effectively, and arguably somewhat more maneuverable than some of the other tanks. And when you're talking about, so one of the advantages of, say, the Leopard 1s against some of the T family tanks is the T family tanks can only go 5 kilometers. Some of them can only go 5 kilometers an hour in reverse. So what they're having to do is turn and show their backs and sides to the enemy because when they want to get out of there, because they can't reverse. So that then makes them really vulnerable and they get hit. Whereas some of these might be crappier tanks in some ways are actually more maneuverable, can reverse more quickly, and so on and so forth. I don't know about the M55S here, but I'm just talking about how the evaluation of tanks needs to take on many different variables and lots of different ideas there. So among other enhancements, I was talking, the M55S has a stabilized British-made L7 105mm main gun in place of the original Soviet 100mm gun. And the gun is what makes the M55S valuable to Ukraine. The British gun is compatible with a wide range of modern ammunition, including armor-piercing sabot rounds, and can penetrate the armor of the modern T-72. Then you see footage like this, and this is where I start getting a bit excited on behalf of the Ukrainians, because we have potentially rather a lot of newly trained or retrained troops being sent into the counteroffensive here. I don't know why things are lagging at the moment. Anyway, you get the idea. The resolution's not great on this video, but there's really quite a few troops here, and that gives you kind of hope for the counteroffensive, I guess. Okay, lastly on military aid, for those of you who like the Bradleys and I wonder what it's going to look like with the Ukrainian pixelated camo paint job, this is it. So we're starting to see Bradleys possibly in Ukraine here, maybe on training grounds still in Ukraine, with the pixelated paint job. This may still be in Poland or Germany, I'm not sure, but things are shaping up. Right, going on to geopolitical stuff to finish off. I've been talking for too long, so I better speed up. Germany's foreign ministry has announced the closure of 4 Russian consulates, a move triggered by Russia's recent decision to cap the number of German diplomats. Super, super important there. Russian diplomats are basically spies. They appear to be just intelligence operatives. The EU Council sanctions 7 individuals accused of attempting to destabilize Moldova and Ukraine. The EU Council announced on May the 30th that it had imposed sanctions on 7 individuals for attempting to undermine the territorial integrity and sovereignty of Moldova and Ukraine. Sanctioned individuals include both Moldovan and Russian nationals, according to the EU Council. Moldova is one of the countries most affected by the fallout of Russia's illegal invasion of Ukraine, Joseph Borrell, the EU's top diplomat, said. Today's listing send an important political signal of the EU support to Moldova in the current difficult context, he added. And we have seen Zelensky meet Maya Sandu, who is the Moldovan premier there. And there's great footage of them meeting here. I say great because when I look at stuff like this, I always think he has a word to his personal assistant in the morning. He like gets up, right, what should I wear today? Got a big meeting. It's like, well, you've got this shade of green or that shade of green. We've got these combat fatigues, these combat trousers, or these ones. Slightly different shades of green. Okay, brilliant. I know what I'll be wearing today. So good on Zelensky. This is all about PR. It's all about. I mean, he has an identity, really strong identity, and that is so important when you are living in a media age, which is massively important. Some people I remember in the States, a few people were slagging him off for that, and I reported on that like 6-8 months ago, and it's like, really. You just don't understand. He's communicating. He's still in war. He's wearing kind of semi-army gear type thing, and he's communicating an identity. And it's just that's the package you get. It's just, I think it's stuff like that is important. Right. Emmanuel Macron, I think, is sometimes maligned by people. He sometimes does say the wrong things or tries to position himself incorrectly, but as someone says here, Nicholas Tenzer says, sorry, but this is a fully misleading interpretation of what Emmanuel Macron actually said. I've often been critical of his past statements, but this is a truncated version of his speech. I was in the room. I listened carefully to him. Read it again. This tweet is pure nonsense. So this is Visegrad, who sometimes are a bit, you got to watch him a little bit. Speaking in Slovakia, Macron says NATO provided, quote, massive armament on the Eastern Front. The arms race must stop and de-escalation needs to happen. And it's basically not what he said. He said it in the context of the EU having to engage Russia to create a lasting security structure in the East. And this, again, people can get the wrong idea of Macron. Phillips O'Brien says Macron's speeches are extremely important on a number of levels. He is assuring CE, so Central and Eastern Europeans, that France wants to be a leader of Europe more than a minor player in great power politics. And they represent a milestone on the Ukrainian journey into NATO. So when you actually look at what he said, it was really popular. So Macron extends an olive branch to Eastern Europeans. The French president was applauded for hitting several popular policy notes in the East. So he said, this is Macron's words, we didn't listen enough to you and your calls for your history and painful memories to be acknowledged, he told an audience at Globsec Security Forum in the Slovak capital Bratislava. Some said you missed opportunities to stay silent. I say we sometimes missed opportunities to listen to you. That time is over, he said, referring to a swipe by former French President Jacques Chirac in 2003 that offended Eastern Europeans. I don't think there is a Western and an Eastern Europe, an old Europe and a new one. There is only one Europe, and we will build, and with a will to build unity. he said. So it's not this idea of almost creating an us and them within Europe, a kind of East and West, an old and new, and all this kind of stuff. It's just one Europe, and we need to build that unity. The French president also said that although France had been criticized as being arrogant, far away, and not interested in the region, he has tried to engage more. His comments appear to hit a chord with among the delegates who applauded him heartily during opening remarks. The speech represents a shift in tone for the French president, who previously distanced himself from a more hardline approach against Russia taken by ex-Soviet states. In the past, Macron had warned against aligning with more hawkish countries, thus risking extending the conflict in Ukraine. But in Bratislava, the French president hammered home his commitment to supporting Ukraine in the long term. Quote, "We need to help Ukraine lead an efficient counteroffensive. What is at stake is lasting peace. We must be clear, a ceasefire is not enough. We will recreate a frozen conflict that will be another war for tomorrow," he said. In Bratislava, while Macron said it was unlikely there would be consensus on full membership for Ukraine, he did give a sense of what option he might back for Ukraine. Quote, "We have to build something between Israel-style security guarantees and fully fledged membership," he said. So that's the idea that, Ukraine need to be in NATO, and they're not in NATO. There needs to be some arrangement where they're fully supported by NATO, quite formally. So Macron's actually saying all the right things there. Credit where credit's due, and that's the time to give him credit for sure. The Czech Senate, talking about NATO, has adopted a resolution backing Ukraine's fast-track accession to the NATO. That's important, but even more so, a powerful call by the parliaments of 19 NATO allies, including US, UK, Germany, France, Italy, Poland, for Ukraine to be given a clear path into NATO and prior to membership, quote, "clear and strong security guarantees," and, quote, "deeper integration into NATO structures and processes." And this process has started with the military equipment that they are now, receiving, using, and getting fully trained on, and will be better than NATO countries at using in a short period, I'm sure. So there are already so many things that Ukraine are already doing that are well on. It's not just about creating a roadmap. They're on that roadmap, and they're actually halfway down some of those roads to getting to this full NATO accession. Anyway, thanks for watching. That's today's news video. Please like, subscribe, and share. Sorry that my words are struggling today. I haven't slept well the last few nights, so that affects my speech. I have progressive multiple sclerosis, so I do struggle with words sometimes. Today's a real struggle day. Apologies. Anyway, take care. Speak to you soon.